Hey guys, Sarah Moore here with The Wandering Nook. In the first video that I did for the Beginner's Guide to the 18th century, it was all about fiber arts. Really, I just kind of touched on all of the different aspects of it, so now I want to start going in a little deeper. And in this video is going to be about wool washing. So it's really hot here in North Carolina, and I am just going to end up sharing a video with you guys that I did earlier in the spring about wool washing. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit first about how they would have done it in the 18th century. Nowadays we use soap specifically for wool, but back in those days they didn't have that. So what they would have actually used was urine. I have never attempted it. I'm not sure that I ever will. But if you want to try using it doing it the old-fashioned way, then save up your urine and let it ferment. To find out more about it, you can get Early American Weaving and Dyeing. It has a section on wool washing. It also talks about wool, whenever you first get your fleece, how you select your wool. A lot of times now when you buy a whole fleece, it's already been what's called skirted, and that means they've taken off the outer edges, which is usually the worst part of it. It's really hard to get clean, and it's usually really tangled. But back in the 18th century, they would have actually used it. So they had 4 different levels of wool. You have the 4th level, which is the coarsest, which would be what we would normally skirt off. It would be the underside of the belly and the hindquarters, and it just kind of goes from there. The sides and the neck are the next step up, and then you have along the back, which is the finer stuff. And so whenever they were getting ready to wash the wool, they would actually lay their fleece out, and they would separate the fleece by the grades of coarseness to fineness. In the resources, I'll share a website that also tells you how to wash wool with urine, and that's about it. Now you guys can watch the video on how to wash it the modern way. Hi guys. I had told you recently that I would start doing some videos on fiber prep and spinning, so this is the first one. Today we are going to talk about washing wool. So as you can see here, I have a bit of raw fleece. This is from a Corriedale Leicester Cross breed, and it is raised, I believe it was raised in Arizona. It's definitely a USA raised sheep. So if you can kind of look at it, it's pretty dirty. I've actually seen much dirtier fleeces. This isn't too bad. Pull it apart, you can see it has a nice crimp to it. Pretty decently length, probably about 5 to 6 inches here. The tips are usually the dirtiest. It's got a little bit of sun damage, so it's a little crispy and brittle at the end, but it's not too bad. It's nothing that I can't work with. So the first thing that you want to do, I'm going to push that to the side a little bit. You want to start pulling the locks out. So this right here would be a lock or 2. Not everybody does it this way, but this is how I was taught to wash fleece. You pull the locks out and you lay them all in a row, go in the same direction. And whenever you come across something like this, you can see there's a little bit of straw in there. That's pretty typical. Lots of times it'll be a lot worse with a lot more vegetable matter in it. So you want to pull that out. And I'm just going to keep going until I have a nice little pile. Okay, so I have enough to do a bit of a washing. I usually use a large metal stock pot that I have specifically for dyeing and washing. And I'm going to go fill that up with very hot water. You want it to be hot because the wool locks are very greasy. Sheep produce something called lanolin. It just helps them to be waterproof, basically. It protects them from the rain. And you don't really want your yarn to be greasy, right? So we have to wash this out. So I'll start with a pot of hot water, and I will get some and I'll be right back. Okay, I've got my stock pot full of hot water. It's probably a half full, maybe not quite. I have my Unicorn fiber wash, and I'm going to put maybe half of a capful in there. It doesn't take much. Dump it in, and then I'm just going to gently stir it to get the soap dispersed throughout. You don't want to stir it too much because you don't want there to be a bunch of soap suds in there because that's hard to rinse out. I'm going to take my wool locks and I'm just going to gently place it in the water. Now, wool has a tendency to felt, so you don't want to agitate it, you don't want to stir it a whole bunch, you just want it to sit in there and rest, otherwise it's going to felt, it's going to stick together, and then you're going to have a mass of wool that you can't do anything with. This needs to sit in here for about 15 to 20 minutes to start off with. You don't want to let it sit in for much longer than that, otherwise the water starts to cool off and the lanolin that has separated from the locks is going to reattach itself and you're going to have to start all over again. So we'll come back in about 15 minutes. It's been about 15 to 20 minutes now. I wanted you guys to kind of see what this looks like. You can see the water's dirty. The dirt is starting to separate from the sheep wool. I'm going to drain this out, but I'm going to do it without agitating the wool. And whenever I add more water, I will take the wool out. I don't want to add water into the pot with the wool in there because that will felt it. Also, whenever I add more water, because this needs to be washed at least a couple more times before it's clean, you want to make sure that you put water in that is the same temperature as what it is now. So just kind of fill it. If you put water in that is too cold or that is too hot compared to what it is now, then that could also felt it. Okay, I have washed it 3 times using the method that I showed you in the clip before, and then I rinsed it a couple of times. And when you rinse it, you're pulling your fibers out of the pot. Then you're putting in water, the temperature that it was before, and putting the fibers in and letting it soak for a couple minutes, dumping it out, and then doing it again. There's no agitating, you don't need to wring it out or anything. So let me show you. This is what the fiber looked like before. Pretty filthy. And this is what it looks like after. So whenever you have wool, if it hasn't been coated, if the sheep hasn't worn some sort of coat, then the tips are always going to be stained and sun damaged, and that's okay. Whenever you card it and blend it together, it has a much more even color, and I typically dye my wool anyways, so I'm pretty pleased with how this turned out. The next thing I like to do to help get the water out so that it dries faster is wrap it up in a towel. So I've laid them all out, and I'm just going to roll the towel around it, and I'm going to press. So that just helps it to dry a lot faster. The next thing I'm going to do is lay it in a shady spot so that it can dry. You don't want to lay it in the sun because that can cause further damage to the locks. Well, that's it. Washing wool isn't really that difficult, just kind of time consuming. If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching my video. Bye.